The statistics on the level of physical or sexual abuse that women endure at least once in their lifetime is startling. About 736 million, according to UN Women, and for many, the offender is an intimate partner or current or former spouse. Although rape and murder are on the extreme end of abuse, destructive verbal and emotional abuse, mostly on social media, is also on the increase. Rather than being passive, many women are now fighting back against sexual and physical abuse, literally through martial arts or boxing, or arming themselves with pepper spray and even firearms. But is this enough? We'll explore this and more on today's edition of Our Voices. Hello, I'm Dimyake Mwakaliele, and this is Our Voices. On today's program, we'll examine how some women on the continent are taking matters into their own hands in self-defense against femicide, rape, and domestic violence, which has risen during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll also demonstrate some techniques that women can use to protect themselves. Proposed amendments to the Firearms Control Act in South Africa would prevent women getting a firearm, even if it's for self-defense. While gun critics say limiting access to guns is proving to be successful in reducing the death toll, some gun proponents argue that taking firearms out of some hands, specifically women, will deepen what South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is calling a second pandemic of gender-based violence. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
South Africa's rate of intimate femicide, the killing of women by their partners, is 5 times the global average, according to the World Health Organization. And one big driver of that, they argue, is the nation's high rate of gun ownership. That's the argument from South African legislators pushing this bill, that fewer guns in public hands has statistically led to fewer gun deaths. Gun owners and advocates disagree. They say it matters who is holding the gun. One particularly vocal group consists of women who say the constant threat of violence calls for self-defense. South Africa's been called the rape capital of the world by Interpol because of the nation's high rate of sexual violence. And President Cyril Ramaphosa recently described gender-based violence as the nation's second epidemic. This 33-year-old woman asked us to conceal her face and use a pseudonym, Foxy, out of fear for her safety. That's because in the space of 3 months, she said, she was raped multiple times. First by a gun-toting home intruder, and then by the friend she confided in. Both men had guns and used them to terrorize her. Now she wants one too, and is seeking a license for self-defense.
Because I'll have it with me, I feel like I'll be empowered, and should anything that is life-threatening happen, obviously I'll try, like they said, I'll try and get out of the situation, but if I can't, then I'll do what I can to save my life. I feel like it would help empower me to know that I don't have to give in. If I can't get out of it, then there's a way to disable them.
Lynette Oxley, a Johannesburg firearms dealer, is the founder of Girls on Fire, a group that represents female gun owners. She trains women to think of guns as a deterrent.
If you talk to all of the lady firearm owners that I've spoken to through the years, they say it actually makes you less aggressive because you're aware that if you do take that step, it's a big step. It's not something that you want to do. So it makes you actually think about scenarios, and the big thing is get out of the scenario if you can. But if you are attacked, then obviously that is your best way of defending yourself against a bigger, stronger perpetrator.
But the very valid fears women have can't necessarily be solved with more guns, says gender-based violence expert Nahama Brody.
I really do understand, as a woman living in South Africa, how vulnerable you feel and how we imagine, because we're told by Hollywood as well as by gun owner lobbies, that having a firearm on your person is the one thing that's going to make you safe. But the data shows us that firearms make all of us anything but safe. And the most important step that we could take to improve women's safety in South Africa would be to disarm more men, not to arm more women.
Brody argues that if the goal is to protect women, there are other interventions, like better street lighting, more community safety initiatives, and burglar bars on homes. All of these women agree on the actual problem here. South African girls and women feel unsafe on the streets and in their homes every day. But are guns the answer? That's the question facing Parliament in coming months. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Now, how do women in South Africa feel about the proposed gun legislation that would stop them from applying for a gun license, even for self-defense? We'll hear what some of them had to say in our segment, Your Voices.
I think it's a must now these days that we get a gun, because now if you look at the things that are happening around our country with the gender-based violence, the armed robbery, the hijacking, in most cases it's women who are vulnerable to crimes.
As a young female living in the society, it's very much dangerous, and I've been exposed to a lot of things, so I feel like it's very much important for us to expose ourselves to learn more about guns.
According to a recent report by the Institute for Security Studies, 58% of victims of domestic violence and homicide in South Africa from April to June 2020 were women, and of these, 68% were murdered by a current or former intimate partner. There is a clear divide among women's groups over the use of guns as a means of self-defense, and this was evidenced by two women we spoke with. We begin with Adele Kirsten, director of Gun Free South Africa, who is pushing for the legislation to pass because she opposes guns and believes they hurt more than help women.
There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that a gun is an effective means of self-defense. And we know from our own experience in this country that stricter gun laws reduces intimate femicide. So to give you more detail, in 2000, South Africa passed a much stricter and new gun law as part of our kind of new democratic dispensation. And what it did, it reduced gun availability. It made it more difficult to get a gun license. And then almost 10 years after the implementation of the law in 2000, the Medical Research Council did a 10-year retrospective study on intimate femicide. And what that study showed is that there was an almost 50% reduction in men killing their female partners with a gun. So in 1999, 34% of intimate femicides, a gun was used. And in 2009, that had almost halved to 17%. So up until 1999, 4 women were killed, not shot, were killed every single day by their male intimate partners. So that meant 1 woman every 6 hours. With the introduction of the gun law, we saw a reduction to 3 women a day. But it's a downward trend where you now have in South Africa a woman killed every 8 hours by an intimate male partner.
Now, this issue of guns and, people's access to them is controversial all over the world. There's a big debate even here in the United States. And what's your input as your organization?
South Africa, we do not have a right of firearm ownership in our constitution. There is no right whatsoever to own a gun. It's a privilege under the law. We, of course, like all countries, there is a right to self-defense, but there is no right to have a gun for self-defense. So Gun Free South Africa's input is to really explore and look at kind of more effective and non-lethal ways of defending oneself.
A big group that is pushing for access to guns are women. And we have we've spoken and also run several reports on women who are now training. They're at gun ranges trying to learn how to shoot to defend themselves. What's your message to them?
There's no evidence to suggest that guns are effective for women against gender-based violence. But there's an increase in police women being shot and killed by the intimate male partner. So if we think of a policewoman, she's highly trained, she knows how to use her weapon, she's been taught how to use it in self-defense. The gun did not protect her. It did not help her. So why are ordinary women, even if they've been trained, why do we think that training to use a gun is going to protect you from male violence?
Founder and CEO of Pretty Shooters Firearms Training, Ternice Reed, defends the right to bear arms and believes if used properly and as a last resort, Guns can save a woman's life. She argues that it's people that kill, not guns.
I think that what we take from firearms is once you know, it's safety. At the end of the day, we teach firearms, but we mostly teach safety surrounding how can we be prepared for the unknown. So we do get some domestic violence survivors. We do get people who've had those issues. But the majority of people really just see the need and saying, you know what, I'm not mentally or physically prepared for an attack or something to happen.
Mm-hmm. There's this controversy and and conversation around gun use, and some people literally put people in certain categories. You're pro-gun or against guns. Is there such an argument that you see, being a person who deals with, training people to shoot for self-protection reasons?
I do. I think it's about perception. I tell people you can look at the glass half empty or half full. I think that it's important for people to know that you can have reservations about the gun culture and things. Everybody always wants to get better and evolve, but reality is you have to stand for what's right and what you believe in. So I totally get people wanting, gun laws to be safer. They are only understanding from their level of perception. However, we still have to know that sometimes it takes 10 to 15 minutes for law enforcement to get to you. In some events like COVID and people got sick, ambulance are taking a long time to get to people. So it's okay to have a plan in place and be prepared and still be a good law-abiding citizen and follow the rules.
Tell me one or two points that you'd like to, or misconceptions that you'd like to dispel about guns.
Number one, people kill people. Guns don't kill people. I've said that for the longest time. I think that when we work on the mental health component, being free for the country and people able to get those services, we'll start understanding that a lot of motive behind attacks have to do with ignorance and carelessness, but it also has to do with the people's mental health. So that's the biggest misconception, I would say. And number two, the only fight in life you're ever guaranteed to win is the one you avoid. I can't stress enough that guns are just the last resort. They're a great last resort, but they're a last resort. There are so many other things that I would do to get out of a situation, to repel an attack. And I tell women all the time, understand that once that firearm has come out, you may not be the person who's shooting, you may be the person shot.
And there is a perception about what a gun shooter looks like, or a person who carries a gun looks like, and you don't necessarily fit that image.
No, I don't. I'm a young female minority. Again, I think that this is amazing, and this is exactly what the culture in the world needs right now. There is so much more that binds us than separates us. And I think the second we stop using certain things, especially race, to profile situations, we would understand that we all really have the same common goal. We all find a lot of the same things fun. We're getting the credentials. We're having fun while we're doing it, and we're showing people and children that you can do this and be safe. And I think a lot of people have felt more calm with knowing that I look like them, that they can look like me and do this and be okay and feel like, you know what, that's my person. So it feels really, really nice to have people tell me I give them hope. So it's amazing.
It's time for a short break. But first, how do you feel about guns as a means of self-defense against sexual or physical violence? And do you think gun licenses should be legalized? Tell us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is at VOA, Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp, and our number is on your screen. Now, when we come back, we'll introduce you to the first Kenyan woman to win a medal in sport of boxing. Stay with us.
On VOA, Our Voices, women are using their voices to empower,
to nurture, to educate,
to stand up in any language.
Amajwi yacu,
Dimsachin, Murioyamu,
Mazwi Edu,
Our Voices.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. A critical part of self-defense is thinking and acting fast enough to fend off your attacker and get to safety as quickly as possible, according to Carol Middleton, founder of DC Impact, which for more than 50 years has taught self-defense classes here in the US and parts of Africa. My Our Voices colleague, Ariane Itangishaka, recently met with Middleton to learn this important art of self-defense.
Now you're up, and I'm laying forward. 1, 2, 3. Head, come on.
Well, I started self-defense as far as teaching because I had an abusive childhood, and I wanted to have other people not have to have abuse in their life. Eventually, I found that just teaching them the moves didn't necessarily transfer into their head. I can do it if it's a man attacking me. So eventually we got somebody in a suit that could take the strikes, and then they really believed that they could do it because they were in real fights, essentially.
One of the focuses of our program is, as a male instructor, what you're trying to do when you're an attacker is try to make the attack as realistic as possible to kind of have the person feel some of the emotions they might feel in those moments.
No! Stop! Crying!
We start with it's just physical, but we learn how to do presenting yourself so that you come across as calm, confident, and aware, and then less often does it turn into an attack. But we train them specifically, okay, so far you were just talking, but now, bang, he goes after you. You have to switch just like that into physical.
Because if you imagine you're in an argument with your significant other, a family member, a good friend of yours, you don't expect that it's going to become physical. But there's moments where it could become physical. And so what we're trying to teach is recognizing those signals of when it could become physical and try to kind of de-escalate as much as possible. But if you aren't able to do that and this person is still kind of becoming more and more enraged, also by recognizing those signs, if they were to attack you, you understand that it's coming, and now you have the skill set to address it.
My formula is, number one, address the immediate danger. If they're choking you and you're trying to hit them back pretty soon, it just takes seconds. You could be out. So maybe do this, but number two is simultaneous counterattack. While you're getting out of this somehow, you're going to hit them right now. Waiting gives them an opportunity to do something to you. Then counter, counter, counter. Hit them back once, that's what people do all the time. It's not enough, or not necessarily. So you're going to count, you're going to kick them down here, in the nose, over here, over there, so they don't know what's coming next. And then you have to go to safety. Run? Sure. But don't just run away. People have run right into traffic and get run over. And where should you run to? To people. Where are there going to be people? Oh, you know that 2 blocks over, there's shopping or there's a grocery store. There are people there. Just the fact that they were there with other people, the attacker is not as likely to want to follow you to them.
Several years ago, you traveled to Africa to train the trainers to do exactly what you were doing. How was that experience?
It was in Korogocho, which is a slum outside of Nairobi of 400,000 people in a space big enough for 5 football fields only. Before I came, it was 97% of the females, starting at a pretty early age, had been raped. A huge percent. It went way down after that. And the people that came the most were the shosho, the grandmas. They kept on teaching, even though they weren't the professionals. They kept on teaching every other female. And we actually put up curtains so that men who were still doing it wouldn't know what we've learned. And so it turned out to be widespread. And I saw that was, I'm worth defending Africa. And so I looked on recently to see if I'm defending Africa is still there. Something is there called Gender Violence Recovery Center. Now, I see they are using the targets I brought them. And so it's still happening, but in a different environment. And that's wonderful.
Those are very helpful techniques. Well, I had a chance to talk with my co-host to find out if they've had any experience of self-defense and what they think women need to do to prepare themselves for hostile situations.
Ariane, what would you say? Do you think now you're ready to use your self-defense skills to fend for yourself?
Thanks, Demi. Yes, I definitely will be able to apply some of the few skills that I learned in the few hours that I was there. I never actually knew how important and effective self-defense class can be until I had a chance to visit one. I learned about 3 key tools that I can use if I ever feel in danger. Like first, I would say A simple trick when you decide to attack an aggressor is shouting very hard. And that can throw him off the first few seconds so you can get your hit in. Second, I learned that hitting an attacker simultaneously multiple times is very important because you want to get in there and do as much as you can right away. The last thing I think I learned that it was very important was that once you do that, once you have your first hit, whether it be a pen that you have from the kitchen, run to safety. And that, I think, is one of some of the very important things that I learned that I'll be able to use.
Simanish, I want to know from you, women now having to fend themselves physically, but shouldn't it be the legal system that protects them so that they don't have to be learning how to shoot, punch, and kick?
Well, obviously, the law is supposed to be one of the ways to protect women from abusers. But unfortunately, we have repeatedly seen that the legal system have failed women, from emotional, physical, economic, or sexual abuses. Or even most African countries now, they have laws that criminalize such abuses. But gender-based violence still persists. And because women don't get justice, I think that's because, one, the system does not allow for the laws to be implemented. And two, maybe there is insufficient legal framework, or especially maybe, as we all know in Africa, cultural practices continue to outweigh legal practices. That needs to change for sure.
Now, Amina, even though, there are all these efforts to help women empower themselves, the real culprits here and the perpetrators of all this is the men. Do you think they could be changed? Could they be trained to not have to abuse women so that these tactics are not necessary?
Yes, Ndemiaki, there are so many things that we can do. But before I say anything, I have one word for all of these men. Stop. Stop attacking women. If you feel as though you're getting angry, if there's an altercation, you're in an argument, stay in control, stay calm. If you need help, go to therapy. You have an obligation to society to be a good person, to be the best version of yourself. Think about if your sister was in that situation, if your mother was in that situation, or anybody else that you cared about. Take a step back and think of the impact of your actions and what long-lasting impact that has on society. So seriously, stop. And for the men of your family or the men in your life, they can certainly contribute by going out with you. If they know that, for example, you're at risk of being attacked, if they know that you have some kind of tension between you and someone, the men can decide to accompany you in a situation where you have to go out for grocery, but it's really dark and you know that the parking lot in your apartment is not safe and there's a possibility that you can be attacked. The men in your family or the men in your life can also contribute by just simply accompanying you. I know it sounds old-fashioned, but it works.
Now to Simanish Yekoye for the Women to Watch segment. Simanish?
Thanks, Ndimiake, and hello everyone. In this week's Women to Watch segment, we are going to introduce you to Kenya's Christine Ongare, who rose above insurmountable odds to become the first Kenyan woman to win the Commonwealth Game medal in boxing. She then turns around her skill to give back to others. Grace Oyanubi narrates the report from Josephine Kioko in Mombasa, Kenya.
A mother at 12, raised in Nairobi's gritty suburbs to surviving by her fists, Christine Ongare has made her dreams a reality. Life was not easy growing up in such an unforgiving environment. Ongare said girls will be physically and sexually abused, and she had to learn from a young age to fend for herself. She remembers how difficult it was for a young girl to raise a child.
Teenagers right now, compared to the life I was raised in the slum, sometimes see these things as fashion. It's like they are in a competition.
Ongare was first introduced to boxing through Box Girls Kenya, an association in Eastlands that helps empower young girls through gloves and sparring. But she began taking the sport more seriously in her late teens and in 2012 competed in her first World Championship. The 27-year-old Ongare has represented Kenya in different competitions like Africa Boxing Champions, World Boxing Championship, and won bronze medal while representing the country at the 2018 Commonwealth Games in Gold Coast, Australia. Ongare, who formed the quartet that represented the country at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, but was eliminated by Filipino boxer Irish Magno.
I'm very happy because that was my dream after I was given a Kenyan flag. Although it wasn't friendly because of COVID-19, I was very thankful for the experience. And I discovered that yes, I see myself as a champion, but there are many champions overseas. But also what helped me is the exposure of being there. For every sport, I believe exposure is very important.
Her coach, Musa Benjamin, remembers how difficult it was for Ongare in Olympics, but says she has learned a lot from the experience.
The moment I saw her down was at the Olympics. When we reached the second round, the game plan and strategy we wanted to apply didn't work. It was the first time for her to come to my corner and tell me, "Coach, this doesn't work." She was also crying, so I had to lift her and tell her we still have another round, and she will represent herself better in the competition.
Ongare says boxing has helped put her life in order, and she has slowly moved from being the laughingstock of the community to being the shining light of her family. She has a mission to help young girls in the slums of Nairobi change their lives through boxing.
She has put a lot of effort and gained a lot of experience. She's not the Christine of 2008 or 2009. She has grown both mentally and physically, boxing-wise. Now she can stand up and encourage other people.
Ongare says she's punching furiously on the bag to show her stakes at the forthcoming IBA World Boxing Championships slated for March in Turkey. For Josephat Kyoko in Mombasa, Grace Oyenubi, VOA News.
Do you know any other young woman who survived physical or sexual attack using boxing, martial arts, or any other self-defense techniques? If so, please share with us. Leave your comments using the hashtag #VOA_OurVoices. Until next time, I am Simanish Rikoye.
Thanks, Simanish. And that's our show for this week. To watch the latest episodes of Our Voices, visit the VOA website at voanews.com or YouTube. Thanks to my Our Voices colleagues, and on behalf of everyone here at the Voice of America, I'm Dimiake Mokaliele saying thank you so much for watching. Stay safe.